Hello everybody, this is Courtney with Fiber Fox Studios and welcome to this episode of Mosaic Monday where we are going to learn how to make a crochet chart. What you are looking at is a basic layout for starting a chart. And I'm going to show you guys how to do this. I'm working in Google Sheets, which is exactly like Microsoft Excel. And you, of course, can do this same thing with graph paper and draw out a graph to work your design and figure out what your chart needs to look like so that you can create a mosaic design all of your own. A lot of you have mentioned things that you see on Pinterest, and there are several on there that are mosaic charts, but they're missing the X. So this will help you figure out where you're going to drop your X's in on those printed out charts that you find in order to create that into mosaic. I do want to mention that some of the things that look like they would be mosaic, they can be even knitting charts, and you can convert them over into crochet into the mosaic designs, or some of them are going to be a different type of mosaic, and those might be a little more tricky to convert, but they can be done. The main thing I want to tell you to look for when you're just practicing creating a chart is look for charts that appear to have a color change on every single row. And that's why I'm showing you this here first. We're going to now go ahead and create a little graph, and I'll show you guys how I fill in and make the different little parts and pieces so that we can move on to actually creating a mosaic in this video right here in front of your eyes. Now, I've never filmed like this before, so I sure hope you guys are going to be able to see what I'm doing. I'll zoom in as I feel necessary. But if you are completely lost after this video, please make sure you leave me a comment letting me know what issues you're having, what things I need to focus more on, and I can do additional videos. So we're going to go ahead and get started by me dropping down where I have a blank screen. You guys can do the same on your laptop, desktop, or if you are using graph paper, you're going to grab your graph paper, grab a pencil with an eraser. You want to definitely start with that because we can just delete things here on a computer screen, but if you're doing it with pen and paper, it's going to be difficult, and you will see why as we move along. So we're going to now, I'm going to pause. You guys grab the materials you need or get your computer ready and get on either Google Sheets or Microsoft Excel. If you don't have either of those programs, if you do have something like Word, Microsoft Word, you could create a graph on that as well and work from there. It's just a lot easier to do it in something like Excel or in Google Sheets because it's exactly like Excel for what we're doing. So here is a blank spreadsheet. It's just as it looks when you open one up. And I'm going to zoom in a little bit so you guys can see the little boxes that already exist. The very first step that we're going to do is we are going to come up here into the corner. And on Excel and the Google Sheets, both function exactly the same. If you click in this little spot where my arrow right here, let me zoom in a little bit more for you guys. So if you see my arrow right here, if you click in the very top, and this is on the left-hand side corner, it will highlight your entire sheet. And you know it's highlighted when you see that it's turned blue. And now I'm going to zoom back out just a little bit for you guys. So what we're going to do is if you put your mouse right over, you'll see these two little arrows that are created. We're going to zoom in again. Those two little arrows are going to allow us to change the size of the box. Since we're up here on the top column, right here is top column, we're going to be changing the width of our box. So you're just going to click with your mouse. Usually it's going to be a right click, but it'll allow you to grab that line, and you see the blue line that's appeared. We're just going to adjust that over. So I'm going towards the left, making my box skinnier. So now that's changed all of our boxes here on this page. So now our next step is going to be to do the exact same thing right here for the width of the box. So we're going to highlight again right there. You see the two arrows. Now I'm going to click, and I'm just going to drag down a little bit, making more of a square. If I don't like that particular shape that I've just created, I can always just grab again and adjust it. So I've made them a little bit wider. So that's how we go about changing our Excel spreadsheet so that it's not quite such a weird shape, because they're kind of like long rectangles. So now our next step is we've got to set up a grid. And setting up a grid is pretty easy. On both of those programs, you're going to see something that looks like a grid line. On Excel, you can see where you can drop down and change the style and all. And the same thing happens here on the program that I'm using. So these are just basic programs that come right on your computer. So we're going to zoom in again. Once you have found where this is located at on the program that you are using, you're going to find a way here on your screen. We're going to go down just a little bit. You're going to want to select a cell. So the highlight in blue means you've selected that cell. And now the next thing that we are going to do is we are actually going to highlight those. So you can do this by clicking and dragging with your mouse. I prefer to use the shift key and the arrows. So I'm going to hold down the shift and just move over and select a number of boxes. At this point, we have not decided what our multiple is going to be. We're first going to design the actual mosaic, and then we'll worry about determining multiples, increasing the size of this little grid we've created, and that sort of thing. So right now our main focus is just to create that grid. So now I have moved over a certain number of boxes with my arrow, my right arrow pointing right, and then I've also, continuing to hold the shift key, I've moved down and I've highlighted a select number of boxes. So let me shift down so you guys can see. So now my next step is going to be to go back to where I found that little grid, and I'm going to click on it. For me, I'm going to have to keep selecting what I want to do since I'm working in Google Sheets. If you're in Excel, it's going to allow you to select it one time, and then you can just go back up to your taskbar and click each time you want to do it. So I'm going to click the all borders right there. And now I have a black grid. So this is the start of what I need for mosaic. So now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to come over here to the ends, and I'm just going to go ahead and put my single crochets in. Now I'm going to have to increase my size real quick for you guys. So 1 second. I like to use like size 24 when I'm doing these, font size, just so it's easy to see, even for myself. And then we can just copy that, or you can just keep typing in each box all the way down. Whoops. We want to make sure that we are notating our single crochets in every single box. So I'm going to Control C in order to paste that in. But you guys can feel free just to type it in the line, or in each box, I mean, at the beginning and end of the row in the very last box. So we want to do that to always remind us that our first and last stitch is a single crochet. So I'm going to come over here and do the same thing right here on this side, on the right side of the graph that we're creating. So we're just going to put that all the way down. And I'm going to go quicker. I'm going to highlight a bunch of cells and paste that in. So now, next step is we're going to need to change the colors. I like to do my color changes right out in the beginning. So I do that so that when I'm designing, I can just drop down and show where my double crochets are going to be. You, of course, may want to do this different, but just follow along with me for the time being. We're going to highlight this first row. So right here, where my arrow is pointing, my mouse, we're going to highlight this entire first row, and we're going to change that to a color. You can pick any color that you want. I'm going to go with blue. So once I highlight it, I'm going to go back up here into the taskbar area, and you'll see on Excel, it's on mine at work anyway, it's located over on this side. Google Sheets, it's over here. It looks like a paint bucket. So I'm going to zoom in for you guys. So what we're looking for is the fill color, because we want to be able to change the color of our row. Right now mine is highlighted that it's white, and we're going to go with, we'll try this turquoisey blue. So let's zoom back out, and you can see we now have one blue line. Now I'm going to be skipping the next one. I'm going to leave it white, so this very next row is going to stay white, because we have two colors when we're creating these charts, and the color that we have here already, the white, is perfectly fine. So that means I'm going to go up to what would be row 3, and I'm going to go ahead and paint that one the same color that I just did for row 1. So we're going to do that real quickly. We're going to hold down the shift, and I'm going to use my left arrow to move along that row, changing or grabbing those cells. And then I'm just going to go here to the paint again and click at that same exact color, blue. So I'm going to do that every other row all the way up this graph to get set up. So you're going to do the same exact thing right there on your screen or on your paper. You guys that are using the paper, you're definitely going to want to probably wait a little bit and see how we work this before you start coloring everything in, unless you have a very good eraser. Definitely do light pencil while we're getting started. So now we're going to go over here back down to what's going to be our row 1. That's that row right there. And over here I'm going to have to insert another column. So to insert a column, I just click at the very top, and let me zoom in so you guys can see. Right there. If you click on this column, this little there, A, B, C, D is what you'll see up there. If you click on that top, very tippy top where the letter is, that allows you to highlight that whole column. And for me, since I'm in this particular program, I'm going to come over here to insert, and I can insert a column to the left or to the right. In this case, because I already have my single crochets, I'm going to do it to the right. So that just added in a column for me. And we need that column because we're going to work down here in the very bottom. Mosaic always starts in the bottom right hand corner, so that's row 1. Now we're going to put for row 2, row 3, row 4, row 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. So this particular one, I just have 10 rows. We might need to add more. We may have just enough. That's the beauty of doing it on the computer, is we can change this very, very easily as we create our design. So now we're going to be starting down here in the very bottom. I'm going to call this blue color is going to be color B. So for this particular pattern, we're going to be starting with color B. You can start with either, and I'm going to go ahead and change this bigger so that you guys can see as well. And we're going to keep labeling. So our white line in my chart is going to be color A, blue is B, A, and you literally just label alternating between your A and B all the way up. It does not matter which one you start with, really. It's just for me, for purposes of doing this, anything blue is easiest for me to label as B, because I remember blue is B. So that's the magic behind that. So now we've labeled our rows the color, and now we're going to go back over here. So we're going to follow me over here to this side, and we're going to go ahead and do our count, our stitch count on the top of the chart. So we know that our single crochet is always the first stitch in our row. So we're going to label that 1. Now we're going to do 2 into the very next stitch and so on. If you're familiar with formulas, you can always do the equal sign. Oop, not plus, equals. You can select the cell that you just labeled. So I don't know if it's showing on here very well, but I've just labeled that cell, or I just highlighted that cell. Looks kind of pinkish, I think. So I did equals, I touched that cell. Now I do the plus sign and number 1. And when I hit enter, it's going to create a formula there. And that means I can grab right there in the corner. You'll see there's this kind of like star that pulls up. Oops, right there. It's like a little weird, almost like a sight, it's weird looking. I can't really describe it. Well, I can now drag that formula over all the way to the end of the row. Move my camera along with us. And then when I let go of it, unclick, it now has numbered all of those for me. Or you can just do it old school and put 4, 5, 6. We're counting like we were counting our stitches. So now we're going to start down here in the bottom corner. So I'm going to zoom back out so you guys can see. So we're down here. We know that this is our first stitch in the row and this is our first row right down here where my arrow is, bottom right corner. Now typically when I start my charts, just like you will, you're going to be doing a starting chain. So I like to highlight underneath the chart, and I actually put, once I figure out the multiple, I put that down there because we're going to have a starting chain. So that's how I identify what my starting chain is in the chart, is I actually highlight the cells. I don't know if it's really showing up in camera. Hopefully it is. Let me tilt and zoom in. So I've highlighted those cells down there. And then on mine, this little weird shape right here means merge. So I can make all those cells down here into one long cell. And then I can go back up here and grab the border. All border. And now when I click away from it, that's now got a border around it. So you can see that's how I show. That's the starting chain. So our starting chain is always going to be in the same color that row 1 is. So we can go ahead and now highlight that as, or mark that as blue, or B for me. We don't need to tint this one because we know that's our starting chain. So now we're up here. We're going to look at row 1. So row 1 is typically a situation where you're starting to build your foundation for what you're doing. So row 1, when you're doing a chart, is always going to be the blank box. We know that our blank box means, from my other video, we know the blank box means that you're doing a back loop only single crochet. So right up here at the top of my chart, I highlighted this box. I just clicked on it and I went ahead and put the border around it. Blank box means back loop only single crochet. So we can go ahead and label that. And I'm going to increase my size. I should have done it on the whole sheet. So I'm going to do that now real quick. All I did was go up here in the corner and highlight the entire sheet that I have. And I'm going to change my font size to 24 so that you guys can hopefully see what I'm doing. So now over here, top of this, I'm just going to go ahead and do a border on this next cell. And inside the cell, when I click in it, I'm going to place an X. And this has now created my key. A box with an X in it is a double crochet drop down, or drop down double crochet is what I usually call them. So double drop down DC, drop down double crochet. So going back down here to row 1. Row 1 is already done. We need to leave that so that we're building our foundation to work on. We're going to be leaving that with blank boxes because we're going to do a back loop only single crochet all the way across that row. Row 2, we're up here at row 2 now, right here where my arrow is pointing. So we can do the same thing on row 2 because I like to have a little bit to work with as far as the foundation. I like to build up my foundation by doing 2 rows of back loop only single crochets. That way I have something to grab to when I start doing my drop downs. So that's my personal preference. If you want to start dropping down here, you're more than welcome to give that a try. But personally, I say move on to row 3. That way when you're doing your drop down, you're going to be matching up with the same color. So we are now on row 3 for this chart. And I'm going to show you guys just something random to give you an idea of how you make the chart. You, of course, can be working from something you've seen on Pinterest. You can have that as a reference. But each cell counts as 1 stitch. So I'm going to go over 1, 2, 3 stitches. So I'm going to have 3 blank boxes at the start of row 3. And then I'm going to put an X here in the 4th box. That's going to be my first double crochet drop down. When you are doing these charts, you can do your color as you go so that you can see what you're creating, or you can wait. But I'm going to do it the way that I typically would do this. Is I've made this a double crochet drop down or a drop down double crochet. So I'm now going to color this white box in with the blue, because when I actually crochet this, my drop down goes 2 rows below, and I am grabbing a loop down here. And let me zoom in so y'all can see. I didn't think about that. Sorry, guys. So I'm here. I've made my X right here. And I've just tinted the box underneath because when I actually do this double crochet, it's going to be connecting here 2 rows below into the same color. So this shows me how it's going to look when I work that double crochet. So I now have covered up that white row. So we're going to go and do the same count. Let's do 3 back loop only single crochets. And then we're going to put an X for our drop down double crochet. And now we're going to go into that white box. And we're going to go back up to that paint bucket. And we're going to paint that the same color blue that we're using. So now we're creating, we've got a little square right here. So we're just going to do this on down the rest of the row. And now you've realized this is how I do the repeat. I'm going to be doing the same thing on down the rest of this row to create this design. And it's a matter of playing with it. I mean, you can delete it if you don't like it. So skip over 3 and put your X. Oops, not a C, an X. And then paint the white box in. Like I said, you could do some X's and see if you like them. And then you could decide, okay, wait, I need to change that. So now here, as we get to the end of this row, I started the row with 3 back loop only single crochets. But because of the count that we're doing right here, if I skip 3 again, I have room to put 1 more drop down. But then my chart would be uneven. And that's where these come in real handy, is when you are trying to mix together multiple patterns, you can kind of map it out on a chart before you do it, or patterns that have different multiples, I should say, because with those, it's all in the math. And I've explained it a couple of times. I think I'm going to come up with a specific video on that. But right now, I already know that on this particular chart that we're playing around with, I'm going to want to decrease by 1 row. So I'm actually going to want to delete out this row so that I have an even front and, or beginning and ending of the row. So I'm going to do that real quick. All I've done is highlighted That row, you can do it with your mouse. For me, I don't have a mouse pad because this is a laptop. So I'm going to go up to edit for me. You can do a right click if you are on Microsoft Excel. You can just do a right click and find this. But I'm going to go to edit, and then I'm going to be able to delete. I can delete a column. I can delete cells. I want to choose to delete cells and shift left because I don't want to delete everything. I just want to delete just that one section. So now that's kind of messed up my little formula. So I just have to go here and redo that real quick. So now we're going to be moving on. It's going to be row 4 next. So here's where you can start thinking about what design that you are actually making. And you can do whatever you want as you're moving up. Technique is always going to be the same. We could do a row without dropping anything down at all. So we could just leave this as back loop only single crochets. But what's the fun in that? So I'm going to jump over here. I've got my single crochet. Then I've got my 2 back loops. So right here in front of this double crochet drop down that we have. So the cell right before it, because we don't want to stack them on top of each other. You can do that every other row. You cannot do it right on top of each other. It will make it all crammed up and weird. So very next row is my white row. So I'm going to do a drop down there. And I'm just going to go ahead and turn the cell white. So now I've turned that cell white. We can see that that's another place that we're going to be doing a double crochet drop down. And we're going to skip over 1, 2. And in that very next box, so I'm skipping 1 box, leaving, so that's my back loop only single crochet. I'm going to do an X in the very next. And I'm going to turn that blue cell right directly below that white, because when we do that stitch, that's exactly what's going to happen. And I'm just going to keep doing this all the way down the row. So here's where you can jump ahead when you know you're doing every other stitch with a drop down. You can just go down and put your X's in and then go back and highlight them, the stitch below, so that you can show where your drop down is going to go. So we're going to do white for this one because this is a drop down. Same thing here. So I'm sure you guys are starting to get the drift of it. You kind of get the idea of what we're doing and what we're creating. There's pretty much not a lot to it. Obviously, if it's not working out perfectly, you're going to be adding in columns or subtracting them. And then once you have done all the work, you know, and you have your pattern and you know you love that pattern, that's where you can start worrying about your multiple. Until we get to that point, I say don't really worry about your multiple so much until you get it designed, and then you can figure out what your multiple is. If you're looking at this up here, we know we always do a +1. There's always the very last chain is always a turning chain anytime you're doing a count. So in this particular design, we would be adding, we'd actually chain 22 to get the 21 stitches that we have here. So now that I've laid this out and we have done these drop downs, I see that for making these little squares we're making, I actually can fit one right here at the front of the row, and I can fit one down at the end of the row as well, and it keeps a nice even pattern. So we're going to jump in there and do that and change this one to white. So now we have these even squares. So from here we can move up another row. We can outline around these or do whatever we want. Let's start on row 5. We're going to skip 3 and we're going to do the same repeat for row 5 that we did back on row 3, and we're going to do a drop down in the 4th box. So we're going to highlight and close that in. And then we'll be doing 1, 2, 3 And then fourth box, we're going to do an X, and then we're going to count over 1, 2, 3. Fourth box, X, 1, 2, 3. Fourth box, X, and then we'll have 3 stitches just like we began the row. So let's go back here and let's highlight, or let's color in what's going to be covered up when we actually do that double crochet drop down. And now you can see we have these cute little boxes. From here we could go on to row 6 and we can start playing with different shapes and see what we come up with. I'm going to skip 1 stitch and I'm putting a drop down right here in the second. So now let's color that in, cover up that blue box with white. So we'd start having, we could skip over 4 again, or to the 4th stitch I mean, and do a drop down, double crochet. So we can do that on down. We're kind of making a little leg up. Goodness, right here. I need to highlight the right box. So as you can see, it's pretty easy. Main thing to get is that you are, when you color it in, you can really see the shape that you're doing. That way you know when you crochet it. Wherever there's an X, you always have to color in the box directly underneath it with the color from the row that you're on. That's exactly how we crochet them. So right now we've created a really simple design. Not a lot to it. You can keep playing with it from here. You can start doing X's in different spots. You could be doing the skipping and 1 box and doing a drop down. So drop down, back loop, only single crochet, then drop down, back loop, only single crochet, drop down, back loop, only single crochet, drop down. Up here on row 7 now, and we can do this all the way down the row. Super simple. So I went ahead and jumped ahead and did the coloring in so you guys didn't have to watch that all over again, because I'm sure you're getting it by now. So now let's talk about the multiples. So if you look back up here at this very first row, we have a nice even design. I like it anyway. So if I'm happy with this, then I have to think about how many stitches do I need to do in order to keep this going. So let's say I want to make this bigger, and I'm going to do a purse, something like that. So I know up here, if I'm looking at this, I've got to count, and I know in this particular one, I end with 21 stitches will create this exact design. However, we have a turning chain, so we're going to have to add that. So it's 22 stitches. So if I was going to keep moving on with this, I need to think about, well, what do I do? What would my multiple be? The easiest way to do this is, number 1, you can look at your work. And if you were to do this, split it in half, would that be an even? Would you come out with exactly what you want to come out with? So let's look at number 10 right here, this 10th row. If I say that this is a multiple of 10 plus 2 at the end, when I crochet this, my single crochets would be right here at row 11. So let me highlight that whole row. So this now would be single crochets. Oops. Row 11 would be single crochets. So take a look at that. Is it even? You can always test that by literally copying this whole entire diagram that you've just made and increasing its size on your computer screen to check yourself. That's usually what I do when I'm doing these for myself, is I start out with a small one that gets me my design, and then I do a longer repeat on it. So I basically double it in most cases to make sure that what I'm thinking is my repeat makes sense. I don't know if that's the best explanation for it, but hopefully it is. Hopefully you're kind of getting it. Whatever you end up with and you like, you're always going to have to add one to it. And then you have to decide, what am I working? You know, the multiple can be different. You can look at it as I do it in a multiple of 9 plus 4 at the end. And where's that get you? You know, so I mean, you can end up with the same number of stitches a couple of different ways is what I'm trying to say. So hopefully this has been helpful. I'm not really sure if this was the best way to teach you guys how to do these, but I tried. Now that I've decided what I'm going to call my multiple, I'm going to go down here in this very bottom row, and I'm going to type it in there. So I'm going to say multiple. First we'll spell it right. Multiple. It's hard typing around the camera. Sorry, guys. So the only thing I haven't really showed is I center everything on my charts. So click the top corner again, just like we did, to highlight the whole sheet. And then you can do the center. It's located somewhere over here on Excel. And voila, you've created a chart. So thank you guys so much for watching. Please make sure you give this video a thumbs up. If there was video or ads in it, I really hope you watched them because a lot of you might not buy my charts anymore. So because now you know how to make your own. I've given away the secret. So please make sure you watch those ads in my videos. It really helps me help support the channel. Please always, if you do nothing else, give the video a thumbs up so that I will move up higher in the YouTube recommendations so more people can see what I'm doing. As always, I appreciate you guys so much for watching. Please leave me a comment below if there's something different I need to do, if there's something else I need to focus on that would help you better understand how to create these charts. Please, please, please let me know down below in the comments. Your feedback is always appreciated. Good or bad, something that you don't like, something that you do like. It helps me to do these videos better, and the better the video is, the more likely you are to learn and want to watch it. So it helps me out when I get feedback, so I do appreciate that. Till next time, have a wonderful rest of your week, and I'll be back next week with a new mosaic pattern, or you guys can crochet this if you like it. Until then, bye for now.